Hello there everybody, welcome to today's video. The Year 7 Season 4.2 designer notes have dropped, so I'm going to go through them, break them down, give my thoughts and opinions. Of course, those opinions may differ from yours. Feel free to debate in the comments, but just keep it respectful. Up first, we have the balance matrices as per usual. Attack is looking pretty much the same and what we would expect. Yana is still pretty much outperforming everyone because of grenades. And we sort of have the staple 4 operators past that. Not really too much to comment on here. So we'll move on to defense. Biggest change here, and this is just an eye test, Alibi has moved down quite a lot. Jaeger now is the most picked defender, whilst not actually being particularly strong. And that's probably where I would have anticipated him to be, given his util, the meta, his loadout, etc. Not really too much standing out here. It's probably the first time in a while we don't have a huge standout operator, unless you want to put Yana in that group. In terms of ban rate, Thatcher still well and truly leading the way, 78%, despite secondary EMPs now being in for a little while. If this number's ever going to go down, it's going to take a long time. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a couple of years at this point because it's just so entrenched. I don't think our stack personally bans Thatcher pretty much at all ever. We're more so in that Jackal camp just because he's so frustrating and he doesn't really have any serious counters that are actually realistic. So that's probably why much of the community agrees with us on that one. Nook as well at 12% to be pretty understandable considering lurk potential and grenades. Moving on to defense then, and Miron now actually takes the reins as the most banned defender. Now, on a lot of maps, this does make sense. There's a few exceptions to that rule, but overall, this is kind of where I would expect it to land. Interestingly enough, Solus is only at 8%. I would anticipate that number climbs a little bit more over time, especially if they don't get nerfed. I still think Solus is a little bit overtuned, but maybe that's only at super high levels of play. Now we jump into operator balance, and this is where each operator has their specific changes. Up first is Grim. Now on the 5.5.2, he will be getting the 1.5 and the 2 times scope. It's pretty obvious at this point now that Grim's primary ability, the Beast Swarm, is just really bad. There's so many other different operators to gain information that are better, namely Jackal. I don't know why you would really ever pick Grim over Jackal. He's just cumbersome to use. The utility is too slow. The information isn't that great anyway. So he's really not that good to play. I guess this makes him a little bit more comfortable with the 1.5 and the 2x. If Jackal is banned, maybe we'll see some people try and go over towards Grim, but I just doubt that's going to be the case. Personally, I'd prefer to just play Lion. All right, now we move on to the Twitch changes, which, based on what I saw on Twitter, was probably the most controversial, or one of the most controversial in this patch. A lot of people seeing it as a significant nerf. I don't really agree. The first point is that Twitch now has 2 regular drones as opposed to 1. She was, I guess, undertuned with Attacker Repick to see where she would land. And now, in hindsight, probably should have had 2 drones to begin with because it didn't really change her playstyle too much. And I think this is a pretty big change. Now you can use regular drones just for finding information, and you can really focus in using the shock drones to clear utility as opposed to sort of playing a more hybrid role on them. Now, some may say that lowers the skill ceiling or whatever. I guess that's somewhat true, but I think this will make Twitch more honed in as being someone to actually clear utility, which always should have been her role from day one anyway. This is where things get a little bit spicy though. The vertical grip has been taken off the F2. Sure, over time the recoil has been increased, but it's still such a strong gun. I think a lot of that comes down to the rate of fire, and I can only assume that shooting that because of the animations and other things behind the scenes is a lot more difficult than just being able to take away an attachment. So they've taken away the vert grip. That's going to make recoil on the F2 really quite bad now. It might not be usable. We'll have to test and see. But the 417 is such a slept-on DMR. DMRs in this game in general are slept on by so many people. The 417 is absolutely insane. You're not going to have issues being efficient on Twitch with the 417 and an extra drone. So for those reasons, unless you were an F2 Andy one trick, I really don't think this is that much of a nerf if you can transition to the 417, which, please, trust me, such a good DMR. You will not have issues finding kills, plus you have that extra drone. Now, for me, this is probably the most controversial change of the patch. Extended barrel now has bonus damage increases the damage of the weapon by 15%. It also retains the same drop-off quality that it had in the past. This is in response to the suppressor or the silencer now really taking the spotlight. So the extended barrel, I can only assume, has a super low pick rate. There's really no instance where you need to pick it, but now there might be. Extra 15% damage, I think on some guns is just going to make them incredibly broken. Obviously, there needs to be a huge breakdown. There's so many weapons in the game, how this is going to affect them. But this is a really interesting one. I've seen some complaints that this will sort of break the consistency of Siege because you won't really know that you're up against an extended barrel and you could lose a fight as a result of it, which I do somewhat agree. I'm very skeptical in this change. It does feel like they're trying to really shove the extended barrel into the meta somehow, when in reality, maybe it doesn't need to be that case. This is going to be an interesting one to watch. Obviously, the big consequence of running the extended barrel is that your recoil needs to be really strong in management, and that is cited in the patch that because landing shots is going to be more challenging, there needs to be a trade-off and have a bit more extra damage. So I don't think this is going to be completely and utterly broken, but it does risk creating some problems that probably didn't need to be made. Hipfire precision has also been adjusted. You can see, you can pause, you can read that out. Mainly a lot of the spreads have been increased. Para 308 has had its damage reduced to 47 from 48. And that's because previously you could get it down on a 2 armor with only 2 bullets. So they've just tuned that by 1 hit point to make it a little less crazy. Even though Capitaine doesn't have a high presence, it does still lend itself to being too strong. So that one makes sense. Supernova, don't mind this change. Damage increased to 55 HP from 48. Trying to encourage the Supernova bearing 9 combo on Echo, and so that you can still enjoy setting up sight, set up sight, and be an alternative to Smoke or Mute, which is great. I think we need more alternatives that are realistic to Smoke and Mute in sight setup, and this might be a decent start. This could lend itself into being a little bit broken on characters like Amaru for rushes, but I don't think it's going to be too oppressive. This one's a pretty significant change as well. The 9mm on Frost has had its damage reduced to 36 from 45. So a 9 HP reduction per shot, which is very large. We don't often see changes quite that big. The devs decided that it's the highest KD gun on defense by far. And that's probably because the 1.5 got reintroduced. So instead of removing it again, they're going to reduce the damage. They do still note that you can one-shot players trapped in welcome mats. I don't think this change is awful. The 9mm is an absolute laser pointer, so you should be getting rewarded for hitting headshots, in my opinion. And 36 damage with its rate of fire, it's still going to be an okay weapon. I don't think we're going to see it drop off significantly, but it's one of these things we just need to get a feel for and actually see play out. Moving forward, Maverick has had a couple of buffs with the AR-15 and the M4, a damage increase, and the 2x sight now available. Maverick has fallen off in the meta. That's not because of his loadout, which historically has been weak. It's more so because his utility hasn't really kept up with the meta. Not only is blowtorching walls kind of a thing of the past, but grenades also aren't in his kit, so it makes him a much less attractive operator to play. Thorn, the UZK, has had its damage reduced 36 HP from 44, so an 8 damage reduction. It had the highest damage per second of any SMG, and now it's more in line with ARs. This has been considered for a while, but Thorn has been very popular. But now with the extended barrel being brought more powerful, it seems like it needs to be brought in line. So this one does make sense. Thorn has always had a pretty strong kit, and in specific situations where you can afford to flex onto a Thorn, which is obviously quite strong. So that one's probably not the worst of nerfs. Finally, the AUG has had its vert recoil increased upward speed and horizontal recoil increased spread during long bursts. Now, the AUG doesn't get played a ton because of the MP5K, so this one's kind of intriguing. Obviously, this will have different values on PC versus console, so don't expect it to be too crazy for Xbox and PlayStation. All right, that will wrap up the video. I think overall the changes are pretty positive. I don't think we need to be freaking out about the Twitch changes. I think Twitch is going to be perfectly fine, if not slightly better if you can adjust to the 417. I'm a little bit concerned about the extended barrel. That 15% buff could break some weapon combos, but of course you'll need to compensate with increased recoil, so it might not actually be too bad. And the other adjustments here and there all seem pretty good. Maybe the AUG is a little bit questionable with the strength of the MP5K, but nonetheless, I think it will be okay. Of course, let me know your thoughts down below. Like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.